Hi, in today's video I'm going to be doing a demonstration of my method of using advanced skeleton. In my opinion, humble opinion, the best auto rigger on the market for probably the last decade at least. It's a great auto rigger in many ways. I'll talk about that as I go through it and explain why. I'm going to attempt to move quickly this time. I tend to move really slowly. Once you get used to this process, you can probably do it in under 20 minutes. But since we're going to be talking through it together, it's definitely going to be quite a bit slower, but I'll try not to get too lost in the weeds here, which I tend to. There's chapter marks below in the description, which you can use to jump to any part of this you need to either review, or if you already know parts of it that you can skip. I will be taking you guys through the whole process step by step. So you should be able to follow this even if it's your first time and create a functional rig by the end of the video. I took the Tuna rig, which is one of the original rigs from the Advanced Skeleton website. I did some modifications to it to make it a little bit better for what we're doing. I'll have a link below that you can download that so you can follow right along with me. I'd actually recommend it. So we're kind of looking at the same issues on the same rig as we problem solve together. All right, let's jump in. First step is going to be to download Advanced Skeleton if you haven't already. I'll have the link down below so you can jump right to it. The latest version is under downloads and you'll see it right at the top here. Just go ahead and click on it. It takes a minute to download. I think it's like 82 megabytes currently at version 6.510. We're looking at January in 2025, end of January 20. Actually, no, it's February. It's just how the days are going. I'm going to pause while this downloads and I'll show you how to install it. Before I jump away here, I'm going to point out that there's some great resources on here, questions answered, the downloads, of course. If you're going to be using it and actually earning money from it, you need to purchase it. It's a very reasonable cost. There's also rigs here, showcase, etc., etc. And the maker of it is great about responding to questions, bugs, things like that. So definitely make use of that contact. The file comes as a 40 megabyte zip, not 80. I think unzipped it's 80. Let's see, 7-zip. I'm going to extract here to the Advanced Skeleton window, our menu file folder. My gosh. There we go. Inside, we're going to have a bunch of files. The one that we care about most is install.mel, not the install.txt. We don't care about that one. I mean, you can read it, but that's not the one that'll work for you. If you don't see extensions, I'd always recommend for anyone in this field to go to View and turn on File Name Extensions here so you can actually see the types of files you're working with. To install this, I'm going to go ahead and open up Maya. Before you install, I highly recommend that you pull up a custom menu, or if you want, you can make an advanced skeleton, custom shelf, sorry, or you can make an advanced skeleton shelf, which isn't a bad idea either. So I'll make one of these here. Just click over in the little gear here, choose new shelf. I'll type in advanced skeleton, hit OK. I can't because I already have like 4 of those shells. Advanced skeleton, oh, and it doesn't like under spaces too. Advanced skeleton underscore, we'll call this demo. So there's my new shelf. To install it, all you need to do, this is so easy and wonderful, you just take the install.mel file and you take it and you drag and drop it anywhere in any viewport and it will install it and give you your shelf buttons. Note that now that it's installed, it's going to need to link back to where you put it. So I'd recommend putting the actual script somewhere where it's going to be easy to go back and retrieve and work for multiple projects rather than like on your desktop somewhere. And yes, I just installed mine on the desktop. You can always reinstall if you need to, but if you're going to be using it a lot, just put it somewhere that it can remain. Great. I'm going to open up the Tuna model. So just going down here and grabbing the model. For now, I'm just keeping everything in the same place. It's a good practice. Begin with your base model in one place and then keep doing your saving out versions as you go. I'll show you that as well, just for best practices. Here's the model we're going to be using, Tuna. Again, I didn't model him. He comes directly from the Advanced Skeleton website, including a fully rigged version ready to go. Just want to point out a couple quick tricks here, a couple quick tips, sorry. To actually start Advanced Skeleton, you need to click on the A button up here. You should appear, then put Advanced Skeleton off to the side as you work. Sorry, I have mine actually open. You can always check for new versions down here. If you look for your current version, check for updates, and it will automatically re-download and install any newer versions. Before we actually start working, I just want to talk through really briefly about how Advanced Skeleton works, or works between here and Maya. In general, you're going to work your way down the pipeline, starting from the top, and then doing each function. So go through the model section before you go through the rig section, before you go through the settings section. Now, some of these you can skip and they're optional. It's not always clear which ones, but I'm going to be helping you out with that. And then as you go, also close down menus. So you're just working on one menu section at a time. Otherwise, it can get really confusing. As you can see here, I'm not following my own advice. So it just helps keep things clean. I'm also going to point out that for most of these options, you will find a question mark here. So here's a button, here's a question mark. The question mark is a quick help. And often these are extremely helpful in telling you what this function is doing, what its purpose is, and how to use it. It's good to read through these things as you get more, when you're first starting out. As you get more and more comfortable, you can just refer to them as needed. Sometimes they also have videos that are linked that can also be very helpful. So it's a great kind of program in that it knows that you're walking through it. That being said, it's good to also read instructions as you go. You can kind of get lost in moving through quickly because you have a tight deadline or excited, whatever the case is, and you miss important things like how to use this entire tool. It says it right there. So outside of this video, if you're going back and using it, make sure to look at those, or even while you're doing this video, especially if you're doing a facial rig, these are really helpful. After you go through the main sections, we're going to jump down here to do some of the other ones. Optimize, publish are really, really important. A lot of these ones in here are optional depending on what you're doing. So keep that in mind as we move forward. All right, here we go. Our first step in using Advanced Skeleton is making sure our model is ready to be rigged, which just means we need a nice clean mesh with good topology, which Tuna has already. I'm going to show you though, we also need to name everything in here. You always want all your meshes named if they're all separate, which honestly tends to be easier. I know there's a push to do it all as one piece, but it's much easier if it's not. This is already set up to go for Advanced Skeleton with this Geo node. Most of you will probably be looking at something like this. And at the very least, what I recommend doing is selecting all your mesh and going to Modify and Freeze Transformations. That will zero out all your meshes over in the channel box, which is what you want. So you always know where the default position is. That's really important in rigging. Again, everything named something appropriate. If it's a right, put an underscore right afterwards, or a left underscore left afterwards. That's standard practice. You should also select all your mesh and go to Edit, Delete by Type History, or you can just delete all by type history if you haven't started anything yet. You don't want anything else in the scene. The other thing that's really important here, you do want to double check and make sure that your feet are right on the grid, not a little bit on the grid, right on the grid. Unfortunately, these feet aren't flat. They're not ideal. If I was modeling this, if this was my model, I would definitely work on lowering the feet. I know it's not quite as cool as having one that is flexing at the end. Oh, it's the other. I was like, why aren't both feet moving? So ideally, you'd want this literally spot on the grid on that vertice, and then flat all the way across. This part doesn't matter, but the heel, same thing. I want the heel straight, flat to the grid. In fact, you know what? I'm going to fix Tuna so you guys get this right out of the gate, but it's good to know that your own model needs to have this as well. Might as well throw this tip in there. I'm just going to fix the feet. I'm going to show you a little bit of it. I'm just going to grab the edge loops right here, go Control, right click to faces to grab all these faces here. And that makes it a little bit easier to grab the faces at the bottom that I want to snap directly to the grid. Unfortunately, from the side view, it's kind of hard to select everything. So probably something like this. And then anywhere I don't need it to actually be flat to the grid, that would be all the stuff in here and this stuff here. I'll press Control and deselect. I'm going to double check and make sure I've selected only the faces I care about. So we'll do this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move them all down, but I want them to move to the same location, flat to the grid. So I'm going to hold in the W key and then left mouse button. I'm going to choose keep spacing off. So this is going to force it to, to when I snap it, it'll snap everything down to the same grid line, regardless of where it was before. If you have keep spacing on, it'll actually remember the relative space and only snap this whole thing kind of as one object. So I'm going to hold in this vertical snap and hold in X for snap to grid. You can also click it up here. And then middle mouse click drag. I'm not going to click on the vertices here or the faces. Middle mouse click drag until it snaps. And you see it did not do what I wanted to do. Well, that was unfortunate. I do not know why that's not working. We'll use the backup method, which is a bit slower, but still works. I will snap to grid anyway. I'm going to scale, and I'm going to scale vertically until these are all in a perfect line. You want to make sure you don't have weird mesh. That looks fine. It didn't do anything weird. We're still all quads. And now I'll just move it back. Again, click the vertical line so it stays vertical. Hold an X, middle mouse click, and then snap to that grid. And now we have a perfect lineup. This will make sense later why this is important. It's mostly just at the ends here, but you might as well get the whole thing. Since I made a change to this, I'm going to go ahead and edit delete by type history. To get rid of any history that I just created, I'm going to bring the rest of the model back, delete the right foot. Oh, nice little sock there. I'm going to just Shift D to duplicate. I'm going to make it go -1 over the axes here. And then again, we have to rename it. By the way, when I do right and left, it's always from the character's perspective, not from ours. So it's always theirs. Again, modify, freeze, transformations, delete history. A nice trick here is if you hold in Control and Shift at the same time, you can click on any command in Maya, such as freeze transformations, and it'll make a button out of it for you, which is awesome for things that you're using constantly. Delete by type history. I'm using these all day long, along with modify and center pivot. Where's my center pivot function? Sorry, this is taking so long. There we go, center pivot. These 3 buttons I'm using all day long. So freeze transformations, delete history, life is good. All right, now the model is ready. If your model's already good to go, no problem, but most models need some work here. So this one is now set. I will put this one up online. All right, we finally made it. Step 1 of advanced skeleton. Not looking good for the speed thing here, but I'm still trying my best. So I was going to open up preparation model. You cannot skip this part. You'll be in big trouble. Any issues with your rig are going to perpetuate, or with your model are going to perpetuate all the way through the rig. It tells you what to do here, but I'm going to repeat it. So it just says go ahead and select all your mesh pieces, including if they're in groups. That's totally fine. Control G to group it, and then type in Geo. It must be called Geo. Advanced Skeleton is very particular about naming conventions, so make sure that you stick to the ones it asks you to do. If you're working off my version of Tuna, he already has this as a group and you're good to go. We're going to click on the Model Clean button. It tells you it cleans the model. There's also a button here to put everything in a group called Geo, so you can use that instead. It's a duplication of efforts here, but since it tells you like to do it here, I like to stick to it. Just hit the button that says clean. Before you do this, though, I recommend saving out your scene first, and actually the programmer does too. So I'll go ahead and save this out. And I'll call this Tuna Mesh. I like to version things, version 01, and then underscore, and put a comment there to say what I did here. I'll just say cleaned. Or prepared, maybe, since we're about to clean this. Takes a minute. Now I can hit the clean button, knowing that if something messes up, I didn't lose anything. Great. So we now have the character here in the window. I do notice this changes sort of the light on the character. I am not sure why. Never figured that one out. This is our new model. This is the one we're going to be working with this entire time as a reference file. So I'm going to choose File and Save As. I know we just saved it. I'm going to save it one more time. This version is version Tuna Mesh, not a version actually. This is going to be base, as in it's the base level mesh, cleaned and ready to go. I'm not for sure here, but I believe that Advanced Skeleton exports this as an OBJ and re-imports it. OBJs are known for, if there's anything it doesn't like, it'll explode the model on site, and you can then see where the problems are. All right, you can do the model check. This is for symmetry. I don't usually. There are tools for seeing if the model is symmetrical or not. Design-wise, an asymmetrical model is usually preferable, but rigging-wise, a symmetrical model makes things way easier, especially for facial rigging. Advanced Skeleton will accommodate asymmetrical models, so it'll just take a lot more time. I'm going to focus on symmetrical models in this particular demo. That's it for cleaning the model. I'm going to go ahead and close this section. Remember, close as you go, keep things nice and tidy. Let's go into the rig section. This part, again, requires that you've saved this out first, because we're going to reference it back in as a base file. New scene is going to actually get rid of this. Again, I've already saved this out, so I don't need to save changes here. New scene is just the same as file, new scene, and then I'm going to click on reference, and it's going to ask me where's the base file. So I'm just going to drive my way over to it, and then choose that base file. That's why I always name it base, so I know which file I'm referencing. As you work through a rig, it is possible to keep changing the base file as long as the dimensions and proportions stay the same. Once you skin it though, that no longer is so effective. So you want to make all your changes to the model before we skin. We're not there yet. You'll notice there's a blue dot on your geo model and it says model before it. This is now referenced in. It doesn't actually exist within this scene. It's just sending a link out to it, which is why you can update the model as you work. This is one of the biggest advantages to Advanced Skeleton, is that it's going to be, you can save your rig in progress at any point with just a normal Maya file, because all that we're saving out here is just the rigging information. I'm going to turn off that symmetry. I didn't notice that. It's created a layer over here, which has a high, quote unquote, the high poly mesh here. V is for visibility, turns this on and off. P is for animation, don't worry about that. T stands for template mode, which gives us this wireframe, which is nice to work with at this stage. R stands for reference mode, which means you can see the model but can't click on it. And if it doesn't say anything here, it's just a regular old mesh. At any point that you want, you can always go to layers and choose, where is it? Sorry for that. You right click on the layer and just choose select objects. That can sometimes be handy when you're trying to get a whole bunch of stuff at the same time that's connected. Over here, it's going to ask you to define the objects. So we want to click on anything that's actual skin. You can see I can't click on anything because it's in the reference mode. I'm going to turn that off. And now just click on anything that's skin on your model. Some things are harder to figure out if they're skin or not, like are the eyeballs skin or are they not? For now, you can leave those off. Let's see here. We've got a little bit of skin down below. Looks like I already had that selected from the arms up here. So I'll just click on the button skin, and then it adds all those to let Advanced Skeleton know that's actual skin there. I'm going to also click on everything. So right click, select objects in the layer, or you can just click on the model geo, add all. That did not seem to register anything. Let me try that one more time. It looked like the layer, it did not like that. I just grabbed everything in the scene this way and then hit all. That seemed to work. By the way, if you make a mistake, you can just reselect and hit the button. It'll replace this with what you need. Note too, these are a really good time to check out your the samples here to make sure you're getting what it wants. And then we just need to grab the right eye. So it's not skin, it's something different. Right eye, left eye. Remember, it's their right eye, their left, not yours. If you have props, you can add that here with the one joint button. Game engine I'm not covering here. The rest of this we can let be alone. The offset parent matrix, I haven't tried this yet, but apparently it just makes the rig work faster, but I haven't tried it. It basically replaces constraints with this other system. Right, we're done with this. The settings we're also going to skip. This isn't necessary. It's just the GUI colors. All right, we are done with the prep. We are now ready to rig. We're going to open up the body here, which is where we start the rig. Just like before, we're going to work from the top down. However, don't get worried here. We have a lot of sections that are optional, including the ones that don't say optional. I'll walk you through those. My intent here is to get you to a base mesh that with a rough painting that works as soon as possible, and that's what we're going to do. So for here, we're just going to begin with the fit menu. We have to load in a base level rig. The biped.ma is just good for any basic humanoid, 2 legs, 2 arms. The biped bendy is great for more cartoony rubber hose style animation, but if you don't need it, don't add it. More controls slow your animators down if they don't need them, or if they do. The biped game is of course a game level or a game based rig. It's pretty much the same as the biped that's for film on other commercial work, things like that. Just going to hit an import. It brings it in. We don't need to worry about the extra limbs and stuff. Or the base level is great as is. Auto place, I haven't gotten this to work yet. It's been buggy for me. It gives me an error every time. I'm not sure what I'm doing, but hopefully this gets fixed. There's a great video on it here and how it works. You can check that out as well. But it looks like a huge time saver once it's functioning as we'd like it to be. I'm going to go ahead and open up the edit section, and this is where we're going to actually do the most of our hard work with Advanced Skeleton outside of weight painting. Just trying to get a proper joint placement in our character. More often than not, if a rig doesn't look good when it's done, it's because your joints aren't placed effectively. So you want to spend time here to get this right. The great thing about Advanced Skeleton, one of the reasons why I think it's the best on the market, is because you can actually test it out, see how it works. And if you don't like how the rig is working, you can pull it right back out, make adjustments, and it just takes seconds to do this. If you're doing this on your own, it would just be a nightmare of work to make this rig adjust over and over again to better joint placement. And this is part of rigging, is trying to find where joints should be. I highly recommend getting some anatomy reference with some skeletons in it. There's plenty on Google you can look at, but that'll help you start to understand where things are in the body, where they need to be to function. I'll be helping you here too. So before we get into this, I am going to do one more file save scene, as I'm going to make a new line of files beginning with Tuna rig. So I know it's the rig, not the mesh I'm working on. Version 1, and we'll say joint placement ready. Guaranteed you're going to have to go back at some point. You guys can't see in the video, but I've already had to go back like 4 times because I missed a step while talking through it. So hopefully you guys will be a little more focused because you're not talking at the same time you're doing this. All right, we are ready to go. So there's just a few things you need to know as you're placing joints. This will come to you faster and faster as you're working. I'm going to switch myself back to that template mode so I don't accidentally click on the body. We don't want to move the body. We want that body to be centered right over that world and again, locked down to the ground. These are joints. You can select them with a drag box. You can select them by clicking. You can click anywhere along the joint and it will grab from the top of the joint. And this makes things much easier. Don't feel like you have to click directly on that dot. Joints here can be translated and they can be rotated. I, however, recommend do not rotate joints. It's much better if you just put them where you want to through translation. There's a couple times we'll cheat on this at some risk, but ultimately here, don't cheat, just translate. If you press the insert key on your keyboard, you can move a joint without affecting the joints around it. If the insert key is off, it'll move every joint down the hierarchy from the one that you were currently selecting. So keep that in mind as you place and use whatever tool works best for you at the moment. By the way, note that over here in our outliner, we are getting new nodes. If I open up the fit skeleton, it's a big one. It has all the joints in it, or at least it has the start of the joints in it. So that's fine. Let Advanced Skeleton manage your outliner until we're done, unless you're just trying to select things. For right now, I'm just going to hide the outliner with this button, just to give myself a little more screen real estate. It's getting tight in there. If your joints aren't displayed nicely at this scale, by the way, there is a scale button over here, joint display scale. You can make these as fat or as thin as you like. For right now, this is a pretty good relative size, but use what works best for you. My recommendation, one more thing is as you're clicking on the joints in the center of the body here, you'll notice they cannot be shifted off of center. They are tagged as centered joints, and we want to leave them just like that. You can move them up and down, forward and back, not left to right. That's on purpose. I recommend beginning with your root joint and working your way down to the legs. Then we'll move up to the spine and finally out to the arms. Obviously, this is only half a rig. When we actually click the button to make the rig, it'll duplicate it to the other side. This is why a symmetrical model is easier to work with in general. Not required, but certainly makes for a much easier life. All right, let's start with the root. It's nice to do the root by finding out where the hip should be first, so you know how low or high this should be. Generally, you're looking for the root to be right around the belly button. So for this character, belly button's probably here, maybe a little bit below it. Right around here is pretty good. The legs right here, if you think about the crease that is in between your leg and your body, that is right below where that joint sits. So the hip joint should be right around in here. It actually is out a little bit further to the side, maybe somewhere in here. That'd be great to get realistically, but I find for most meshes, unless they're hyper realistic, just go ahead and kind of get it in the middle of the mesh. Ideally, the leg is going to be straight up and down. And if you can get the mesh in that position, just makes life a whole lot easier. So right in here is quite good for me. And again, when we're looking at we're kind of trying to eyeball that crease in the leg and try to get it sort of along that path. The root is going to generally be just above this. I like a little bit of distance here. So it's not level necessarily, unless that's really what the model looks like. So we're kind of looking again just below the belly button. Anything above the root is going to be bend with the back. And so you can kind of think of it that way. What should bend with the back? So actually I might be a little bit low here because we're still in the butt region. So somewhere right in here should be good. Again, you can change this placement later as you see fit. You'll notice right now that my control is moving. My manipulator is moving in the direction of the control. I actually want it to move in the direction of the world. To do that, you can either double click on the move tool here and then switch it over to axis orientation world. Or what I prefer to do, it's a little faster, is if you hold in W for the move tool and then left mouse button hold, you can also choose those orientations right there. So here, I'm just going to switch it over to world mode, which again is quite a bit faster. Last thing here, I'm going to go ahead and set this joint up for the front view, and then I'm going to go back to the side view and adjust it as needed. Actually, I lied. I'm going to do this from the side view and then adjust it from the front view. You're going to have to do one and then the other. I'd highly recommend that you do not use a perspective view to set this up. You're going to get much better results doing it from the front and side, so you know exactly where everything is. All right, so root control, I'm going to slide this to the center of the character, and the hip, again, the center of the leg. I already know I like where these are on the front view, so I'm not going to lower these or raise these here. I'm going to keep it where it is on this part. For the knee is easiest to see from the side view, I find. Ideally, you want the knee itself, I'm going to exaggerate this, to be slightly forward of the hip and the ankle. If it's backwards, you're going to get a leg that goes backwards. You can fix it, but it's better just to not go there in the first place. So I'm going to cheat this down here. The foot is often misplaced, I find. The foot rotates from your ankle, of course, and your ankle is often much lower than you think it is. If you feel that little bump, or actually large bump, on the outside of your left or right foot, that is where your ankle rotates from. So if I picture that in this character, I'm looking at right around in here. That's where I want the foot, or the quote-unquote ankle, to be. Don't worry if it doesn't line up with the mesh perfectly. You can cheat a little bit to try to keep it in the center of the mesh. Actually, this will be easier to see. I'm going to click off the template mode, go to reference mode, and over here under shading, I'm going to choose X-ray joints. That way you can see the joints through the mesh. Sometimes that's a little bit nicer way to see what you're doing. You can also go turn on X-ray itself to get a transparent character. That may or may not be helpful depending on what you're looking at. Great, so I have myself an ankle. Now let's do the bottom of the foot. The way I like to approach the bottom is to get all these joints really right on the grid here. Since the model or the mesh of the shoe is already spot on the grid, we should get a perfect pairing that will sell the weight of the foot or the body on the foot as best as possible for our animation team. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and click on each joint, beginning with the heel. Doesn't matter which order for the most part. Just hold an X for snap to grid, and then click on the Y axis to snap it up to the grid. For the toes, same thing. Same thing with the toe end. And then here it's hard to see, but I'm snapping the big toe and the pinky toe up as well. So X, up, X, up. So now we're all spot on the ground, the mesh and the joints both. Once those are there, it's just a matter of getting these in the right place. Now, just in case you're wondering, the bones obviously are not rotating from here on the ground. They're rotating from the middle of the foot. So this will give slightly different deformations. They won't be perfectly accurate for hyperreal, but what it will give us is perfect animation controls with these controls operating from the ground plane, not the middle of the foot. And that's much, much better for our animators. I'm going to do the heel first over here. What I want to try to do is get it spot onto this end. You can do it by dragging this here and trying to line it up. You can probably, if you have this unreferenced, you can hold in V for snap to point and snap it over here. You should get it precisely on there. It is good to get it as precise as possible. For the toe, I'm just going to grab the joint in the middle here. Turn on my X-ray joints again. And what I want to do is line it up with the ball of the foot. So for this one, sometimes you just got to guess. Depends on your mesh as well. If you this character has plenty of mesh to work with. Some have only like a line or a couple lines if they're low poly. Here, it's typically the widest part of the foot if it's a more anatomically correct foot. So right here is the widest. So just in that area is probably going to work best. So something like this. I'll do these later. For right now, I'm going to do the toes as well. Again, I'm going to use that snap function, hold in V, and then using the world axes, I'm going to snap this over to the exact front of the foot. These guys here, the big toe and the pinky toe, I'm just going to pull out to the sides, and I want to line them up with where the shoe or the foot, whatever you got, connects to the grid. So for here, that's going to be right here for me. You will find if this is excessively rounded and not snapped to the ground, you kind of have to guess and then test and then see what you like. If it doesn't work, you can adjust again later. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to jump around. So right there. So that is the proper foot placement. Ideally, your bones would be in the middle of the foot. If you do need to rotate, again, we typically don't rotate joints, but if you need to rotate the controls out to match an angled foot, you can, preferably with a model, it would be straight. But you do want to keep all those controls in line with each other. So rotation here is preferable to just translating them all. All right, so our root to foot is complete. Okay, let's work our way up the spine. The root joint's already placed. The chest, I've had varying luck with the chest in different locations. This is something you might want to explore. Sorry, I'm going to switch over to back to template mode here. I tend to find that the body gets really stiff above the chest in terms of the controls. I don't get quite the deformation that I like. I know that it's designed to be right about here. This is actually a pretty good placement right off the bat. We're going to stick with that for now. And again, if you don't like the results, you can later on adjust it up or down. I recommend, again, higher, closer to where the neck meets the body. For right now, I'm going to jump to my side view and press F just to jump in there. I'm going to place the chest joint right in the middle of the body. In general, I find that I get better deformations, one, on skinny characters. It's just easier to adjust them for the mass, and usually going for the middle of the mass. Yes, our spine is a little bit more off to the back. You can try out this as a more a correct anatomical layout. This is one of the few times I cheat. Otherwise, I get lots of weird folding in the front of the body. Definitely don't go for the back. The middle of your spine does not sit along your back. It sits within an indentation and then inside the skin. So somewhere in here, if you're going to try it out, would be a better place to go. Again, I'm going to kind of strike a balance in the middle, slightly off, back of center. The middle joint here, I do after that. I'm going to press insert so I can move it wherever I want. Nice trick here is if you click on the center, you can middle mouse button as long as no arrow is selected here, and you can move this anywhere in the plane, or if you want, you can just grab the red square up here. What you want to do is get this to kind of follow the contour of the body a little bit. Don't think about it in terms of an actual spine and try to make it all curvy. That usually just gives you bad results. So somewhere right in between the chest and the root. This will be repopulated later with a system of joints to give you nice deformation. And again, here I'm going to try to follow the back a little bit. So something like this is good. Let's go ahead and work our way up the spine. So the base level of your joint, again, you kind of want these to be in a nice smooth line with each other. Don't do crazy big curves. Makes it worse for your animator. So you're looking at the base of the neck. So it's probably a little lower than you think. You actually want it here where the neck flares out, just a little below that. Usually gives nice results. If you get too low, it's going to move the shoulders. You get too high, it's going to feel like it's not connected to the body at all in terms of deformations. Here is the head joint. A lot of animators don't know where the head joint is. It's actually just here below the ear is a good placement. You do not want it to be at the base of where the head and the neck meet, or God forbid down here. Again, the neck's going to be replaced with multiple joints. This will look much better. But you want it up here. You can also look at the back curve of the head and try to get it right around there where that curve connects to the body. That'll give you a nice placement as well. So somewhere right in here should work out great. The eyes, generically, I'm just going to move them up here. We have to do this from a couple different views. The jaw is another weird one. I'm often mistaken. So the jaw actually hinges from right here in front of the ear. If you find your ear hole, it's going to be right in that space. You can feel it as you open and close your jaw if you touch that part of your body. This will give you much better joint rotation, much more realistic joint rotation, which if you don't get, does look really bad. And then here, I usually just stick this at the front of the lips. I'm not sure if there's another intention for it, but that gets me good results too. And then finally, the head control. You can just put it straight here at the top of the head. I also sometimes will put it at a slight angle here, just so I can see the control rotate. If you put it straight up, it's harder to see it rotate if you need it to. Not the control, sorry, the joint. And then finally, the eyes. The eyes you need to have lined up with your eyeball in two different locations. So I'm going to zoom in here. It's pretty tough to see everything here. So I'm just going to open up my outliner and then open up the modeling. I'm just going to select the eyes. Where do we got? Eyeball left and right. Actually, we really only need one. So just the right side here. And I'm going to press Alt-H, which will hide everything else, all the other mesh in the scene except for that one piece of geometry. What you want to do is line this up as perfectly as you can. The better you line it up here, the better results you're going to get. And with eyes, since they're spheres and have to rotate, you really want to kind of knock this out. Here's another view of what we're looking at. Just, it gets kind of convoluted in there with all the joints. But we're just trying to line up this joint with the center of the eyeball. This joint is going to tell it where to angle. So this will be right to the middle of the eye right here. This one you can actually snap. This one you can't because there's nothing to snap it to, at least the normal snap function. So I went to go snap this together, which is the easiest way to line these. And I noted that the pivot was not centered in the middle of the eyeball, which is bad. So I went ahead and I'm going to go ahead and select the object and do modify center pivot. For those that you were here earlier, you know that I made a button for it. This would do the same thing. So this should get my eyeball rotating spot on in center. The downside here is you'll notice is that my eye is pointing, the manipulator is pointing forward where the eye is pointing to the side. So I'm going to temporarily fix this. If you have eyelids that are connected here as a physical model, you might want to rotate those too. If they're part of the skin, don't worry about it. I'm just going to eyeball this. Ha ha ha. Sorry, didn't mean to make such a bad pun. I'm going to do my best just to line this up with the grid. I'd much prefer that this was a perfect lineup. The more perfect you are with a rig, the better it's going to be. So unfortunately, it's also off on multiple axes. So this is going to take a minute to get this to line up just so. Looks like it's even off in this direction. I always like my eyeballs to be frozen with respect to the grid. And then if I offset them from there, I no longer freeze them. I want to always be able to get back to this type of view where everything's perfectly centered. Otherwise, you're doing what I'm doing here, which is a load of work, and it's never going to be perfect. Does perfection matter with a rig? Yep, it really does. I could also just put in a new eyeball there. I'm not going to bother with that now, but I will fix this for the model that I'm having you guys imported so you don't have to go through this. I'll pause while I fix it. All right, so I did the best I could. It's not perfect, but it will work out. What I want you to see here, just in terms of what I was doing, because you want to do it on your own model, is the manipulator here is now not centered with the eye, but the eye is centered to the grid. So now once I hit freeze transformations, they should all line up nice and pretty. This is what you want, an eye that's zeroed out when it's pointing forward before we try to snap everything together. So now that we've done all that, it's a little bit of extra work. Oops, I do not know what I did just there. Okay, I hit something and I had to freeze it again. Okay, it keeps doing it. I just also realized that the problem is it keeps resetting itself, and part of that is because the I'm freezing transformations on a model that is being referenced in. So any changes you want to make on the model need to happen on the referenced file, that base file that we originally made. I'm going to go ahead and pause for a second. I'm going to save my progress out, change the original file. The good news here is it should automatically update the position of the eyes with them frozen, which should make my life a lot easier. So I'm going to just go ahead and do that now. You can see it just reset again. So here we go. I'm going to change the original model file the same way I just did, and then should be able to open this file again. Because it's referencing in, it should be clean and ready to go. All right, sorry for that interlude. We're back, and I adjusted the original file so that both eyes are zeroed out. Importantly, I didn't change the name so that ultimately it updates correctly. Referencing works through naming, so you can't change any names on things once you're referencing the model in, excuse me. In this case, I left it pointing straight forward, but according to the model, if I bring back all that skin, so I'm just going to open up the geometry here and bring this back. Now he kind of looks cross-eyed with those eyes zeroed out. So I'm just going to adjust this over to where it looks correct to me. So I'm going to say just -10 degrees here, and then make this one +10. I think that was going to rotate Y. And see what I think. The advantage here, I'm not going to freeze transformations anymore, is that the manipulator lines up with the eye. And that's what I'm looking for. So you can see here from the top, it lines up nicely with the eye. It looks a little bit heavy. I think I'm going to go back to 8 degrees maybe. It's important when you're working with your eyes to keep those, oops, that's -8. To keep those eyes frozen, zeroed out at the forward position. That looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. So I'm not going to freeze now. The eyes are off at an angle, but the manipulator follows that line. This makes this part much easier. I'm sorry that took so long. I can now line up this joint and this joint correctly. So I'm going to click on the joint here and shift and click on the eyeball. And all I need to do is just go to modify match transformations and tell it to match the translations of these two. So that'll automatically snap this perfectly to the center of the eyeball, which is what I want. And now I just need to snap this to the center of the iris. To do that, I'm just going to click in the center so that no arrow is selected. Hold in V for snap to point, and then middle mouse click drag. I'll turn on the shading so you can wireframe shaded so you can see this. Middle mouse click drag on the model, and now I can snap it straight to the center of the eye, and that's a perfect alignment right there. So that's what I'm looking for. Once I've done it there, I can just control, let's see here, Shift H on all these model pieces that disappeared. And now we should be good to go. You can see it's right in the center of the eye and pointing exactly the right place. That's what I want. All right, that was a bit of a slog, but the spine, head, and eyes are now complete. We're going to now move on to the arms and hand. Might do those separately. Hand is a little bit of work. This is a probably good time to talk about your character's pose. This is considered a T pose, where your arms make a T shape with the model. This is sort of an old school way of working. It makes it much easier to rig, which is good for us today. It does produce not great shoulders because ultimately in this position, to get your arm straight out, you have to have the anatomy of the character. Force means that you have to have the clavicles, this joint here, raised. And often that's not kind of how the rig is set up. So it makes things a little bit awkward in the shoulder area. For comparison, this is called an A pose. It has more of an A shape to it. This typically gives much stronger or much better results with the shoulder. It's a more natural position to model in, but it means you have to rig everything on an angle. Note that the hands are pointing down here and the hands are pointing down here. That's the exact position you want for most rigs, including Advanced Skeleton. Let's go ahead and set up the arm here. I'm going to be in... Sorry, I just accidentally paused the video. All right, let's go ahead and dive in here. I'm going to start with the front view. And ultimately what we want to get, I like to do the shoulder first and skip the clavicle and come back and do the clavicle later. To get the shoulder placement, this is probably one of the most awkward ones to get in an entire rig. It really depends on the quality of the model. If the shoulder is actually modeled correctly, is in the right place, you can get some really weird results here if you get the joint in the wrong place. Again, the advantage of Advanced Skeletons, we can kind of go back and forth until we get it right. But here's a good general rule. If you kind of look for the curve of the shoulder, you can see it right here. And then look for the center of the mesh in kind of the radius of that shoulder. You generally get a good placement. So again, this is kind of, if we were to sweep a line from here to here, this is going to give us a nice radial, a nice radius that matches the model. So that's what you kind of want to look for, is that bulge. You get a lot of weird things in here depending on the quality of your modeler. In this case, this is pretty good for us. So I'm going to put it right here within that radius, and oops, let me lock off that body there. And I want to try to cheat this in the middle of the mesh if I can. So if I have to cheat it higher or lower to get this to look right, I'm going to do it. The arm is one of the parts of the body that rig better if you keep it straight on at least one axis. So we don't want this like at some crazy angle here and some crazy angle on the top view. These multiple angles start to create problems for us. So again, I'm going to attempt to hit the middle of the mesh in the right place, but keep the arm straight. The modeler in this case has made this very easy for us, and I am grateful. From the top view, I'm going to go ahead and line up the elbow joint with the elbow. Ideally, you'd be looking for a series of 3 loops here. Let's see if I can turn on the wireframe and shaded. So 3 loops, 1, 2, 3. The center of those loops is going to give us a nice clean bend here. It looks like, it's hard to tell which one's the crease of the arm. It kind of looks like this one, but this is clearly the elbow. So I guess I'm going to average between the two and hope for the best. Again, we can check it later. From the front view, this is looking good. Shoulder, elbow, and then wrist. Again, I prefer this to be a straight line, but I would rather this be in the middle of the mesh. The wrist, the arm twists from the wrist to the elbow. I want to make sure I'm using that mesh effectively. Here, what you can look for, if it does have a bump on the wrist, that's a good indication of where the wrist should rotate from. If it doesn't, like we're seeing here, just aim for the middle of the mesh about where that bump would be on a normal human. And then double check our work from the perspective view is looking good. The clavicle is an interesting one. Oh, why didn't I get my chest way off? That does not look good. This is at some point I went back and I forgot to link these up. Let me go ahead and fix these real quick. We'll be right back. All right. The good news is that once you get used to this joint placement, you can rip through this part in like 10 or 15 minutes outside of the hands. The hands are kind of slow no matter what you do. So we want to get this clavicle joint here. A couple different ways you can play. The clavicle joint connects right here. You can actually feel it on the outside of your own skin here. There is no actual clavicle here, but on your own body, you can see from the shoulder, there's that line, that ridge that runs out here. You can feel it connect right in the center. That is where the clavicle should be. So on our character, it's towards the front of the skin and at the base of the neck, pretty close to center. You actually want to get this rotation right. It'll make for a much better looking shoulder raise. We're also kind of faking a clavicle, scapula movement with it too, which is the muscle or the bone back here. You might want to try playing with, depending on the cartooniness of the character, with placing this in center, and see, so it actually works both the back and the chest. I typically cheat mine towards the front, not the back, but you can try both and see what looks better to you. With all this placed and set up, I'm going to go ahead and save out a new file. We haven't done that for a while, so save scene as. I'm on version 4 here. I'm going to save out version 4 and I'll say arm joints placed, something along those lines, or I guess I'm saying complete, arm complete. So save versions as you go. I've already made multiple mistakes just while working with you guys, and I've had to go back several times for different things. So good plan to do it. Good plan to save as much as you can. Okay, so now we're moving into the hands. The hands take a little bit of time, but it's a lot of repetitive stuff. Once you get used to it, it's not bad. Just a few things that you want to make sure you get just right. The hardest part with the hands is visualizing them as you're trying to figure out where the joints go. So we'll cover a bit of that. Also, if your hands are in an A pose or an A posed arm, it makes this process, it's the same process, but it definitely makes it a little more convoluted. I'm going to get rid of my wireframe and shaded so I can see things a little more clearly. I'm also going to go back over here to my joint display and turn this down to something a little bit more palatable for a smaller part of the body. I do like the way this is modeled and that the fingers are all separated cleanly. This will make sure I get a much better result than I would if the fingers were really tight or overlapping. I don't care about the angle. It's nice to have straight fingers, but I'd much rather avoid that overlap in the mesh. So we have our wrist joint placed. I'm going to start with the top view. This is why we want our palms pointing down. Also, that's what most rigging programs and most animators are used to. Let's start with the placement of the thumb. So I'm going to go ahead and put this. This is kind of a weird one. The base thumb joint is way deep in the mesh, and a lot of people don't put a model in there for it. We actually have more of a bulge here on the pinky side than the thumb side, but it's right around here where your thumb's going to start. The rest of the joints here, I'll show you where they're placed, but we have to actually rotate them in a second. We should actually rotate them first, but just to get you a sense of where the bones are placed. Your next joint, you can see this bulge here. Hopefully your modeler put that in. This would be the second knuckle actually. Our third knuckle is up here where the thumb turns this way, and this last bone joint goes here. I don't like this to be all wonky if I can avoid it. So trying to get this to be a little smoother, I might cheat it just to keep these bones a little more in line. But if you have to, if you need to, I'd recommend focusing more on where the joints need to be placed to get an accurate thumb. Now, the other important thing here that's different than the fingers, which we'll cover in just a second, is that the thumb, let's look at it over here. The thumb, you can see it rotates in, not down, of course. We take it for granted, but it's easy to forget when you're actually putting joints in there. It's really important that the joint rotation follows this thumb. In this case, it's kind of at this angle. You might see on some models it actually points up, which is also common, or maybe down at a slight angle. But either way, we want to match the the mesh, sorry. Otherwise, we can get really weird results. So the rotation we're looking at is this one here. I'll use minus to make my manipulator smaller. Use plus to make it bigger. So I want this rotation here in the thumb to match the direction of the mesh, and you can see that it is not. So I'm going to rotate this over so it matches. When I do the Y, it's matching the direction of the thumb. I'm going to look at it from different angles and try to get it right. You can also go ahead and translate this into place. So that's looking pretty good. I'm going to fix the fingers and test it again. So I'm now just going to translate these back into place. So again, right here. This is why we want to do the rotation first, so we're not wasting our time. So that's, and I'll adjust it from this angle too. So again, I'm going to turn off the wireframe shadeds. It's too much to look at. And just put this in the middle of the mesh. Again, translating these and this one, but looking at my rotation from this knuckle. That's looking good. So now we have the rotation going in the right direction and all the joints are lined up. Rotation, don't worry about it on this one. The default is fine. All right, so that's good. Now we just have to do the fingers. This first joint here should be at each knuckle. Now you might have a wireframe that has nicely modeled knuckles that you can see them. In this case, I don't really see anything that shows off as the knuckle. A little bit, there's a little bit of a bump here, but it's actually back here that I want to put that first joint. So if you get hand joints in the wrong place, it really looks bad. So you want to spend some time getting these to look good. As you place the fingers, it's the same thing. You might be able to see, like I can see the joint here, they actually put it in. Maybe right here, it looks like this is the joint. In that case, leave your wireframe on, otherwise you can turn it off. So here, we're looking at right about here. I'll turn this off just so you guys can see it. So right here, right here, right here. On a hand with correct anatomy, it should kind of make this slightly curved, rounded shape. And even if it doesn't have it, best to fake a little bit. You'll just get a much more convincing looking fist or hand gestures if this is placed correctly. So a little bit of a curve here. I'm also from this view, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to use this rotation on the outside to rotate the finger to point down the length of the finger. The more you can get this on center, the better and easier the rest of this is going to be. I know I said don't rotate joints earlier. This is the one time I cheat and do it. There's a button here that'll help fix this, but again, I just try to avoid it in general. So now they're lined up. The nice thing about doing this, it makes it much, much easier to position the fingers down here. If I hold in W and left mouse click and switch over to object mode, you'll now see that the manipulator flows down the chain as opposed to lining up with the world, which makes it much easier to go ahead and place these joints. Again, here wireframe may help you or it may be a hindrance. It's a little tough to see that first knuckle here. You might see it in another view better. So if you can go over here and see it, here it's very clear. So right there, you can see the first bend in the knuckle. You can use your up and down arrow keys to kind of plow through each of the joints. Don't worry about where they are vertically. We'll fix that next. Right now I'm just looking for the next joint, which should be right around this area. It's not as obvious on this one. If your character has a texture that you can use, that also might help. But I often find that modelers and texture artists don't necessarily know any better. It might be up to you to fix some of their mistakes. Generally speaking, we're going to look at a longer joint here, a smaller joint here, and the smallest joint being the last one. So this one's a little bit wonky. Right about here looks pretty good. If there's an obvious mesh like we have here, I wouldn't mess with it too much. That's pretty good. I'm going to work through the rest of the fingers and line each one of them up. It takes a minute, especially with a character that's not quite as obvious like this one. But once you get through it, not a big deal. I'll be right back. All right, so those are good to go. Except for, of course, from this view, you can see that we're not correct vertically. But since I know that they're perfect from the top view, what I can do now is I can just go through each one and then aim for the middle of the mesh, going straight down. So that's one thing I want to change here. In fact, I got to fix that. I want to switch back to the world mode. If I go straight up and down, it's going to maintain the position that I did in my top view also perfectly. And then I'll end up with perfect joint placement. So here we go. I'm just using the down arrow key to jump to the next joint and trying to keep them in a nice straight line. Ideally, they would be in a perfect line, but it depends on how the fingers are modeled as well. In this case, they're modeled with a bend, so I don't really have much choice. I'll do one more here, and then I'll just pause the video and go through. So I like to work in the X-ray mode here, move in multiple directions to really see if I'm getting the mesh in the right place, or the joint, sorry, in the right place. Again, now I'm just going to go straight down in each one of these. This works even if your character is in an A pose, so it's the same system I use if my character is not in the super nice, easy to use T pose format. So on most of the characters that I model and rig, that's what I would do. That final joint, don't worry about placement, just put it somewhere on the tip of the finger and you're fine. It doesn't actually do anything. All right, I'll pause and finish, catch back up in a second. All right, so we can see, looking through, we have nice placement of all the joints. You can see if you've done it right again, you should see a nice kind of fan of placement here in the main knuckle. Same thing with the rest of these, it should kind of fan out. Partly, again, this is dependent on the quality of the model itself, but something you can also fake if the model is kind of generic. It'll just give much better hand poses and gestures later on. We are complete. That is our first skeleton setup. Again, this is one of the most intensive parts of using advanced skeleton. The weight painting is a little bit of work, but this is the hardest part in the front of it. You can make a quick rig just from this alone if you didn't really care about the quality of the weight painting and call it a day. If I'm not talking through this part and just doing it on my own without you guys listening, I can usually pop through the joint placement in about 10 to 15 minutes. And again, that gets me most of the way there on a rig. All right, this is the magic part here, where we actually get to translate this well-placed skeleton and turn it into a rig. So always save before you do this, just in case something goes awry. You can go back to this part and hopefully fix it and not be stuck. I rarely have issues here though. It's pretty straightforward. So most importantly, what we're going to do is before we do any changes here or before we make the rig, we need to hit update now under this auto orient command. What this is going to do is going to go through every joint in our rig that we just moved and placed, and it's going to reorient the local axes for it so it points down the chain. This is what makes the whole rig work nicely and intuitively once we get the actual controls and everything there, once it's skinned and ready to animate. So really important. There is this fit mode button which you can turn on, which automatically updates every joint as you go. I tend to find this is a little bit slower just because the computer is constantly calculating. So I just hit update every time, but you cannot forget. You really have to hit that, otherwise you're in trouble. We can now go to the build function here and hit build advanced skeleton. As you do it, you can watch, I don't know why my timeline here is so weird looking. You can watch down here. It'll tell you when it's complete. Until it is, don't do anything with your computer. Just let it sit and process. You'll see your mouse flicker a lot and do some things. You'll see some stuff happening on the screen. It's telling you what it's doing down here, but don't touch anything until it says build complete. Doesn't take that long. You're probably looking at 20 seconds or so. And we have a fully functioning rig. This is a great quality rig. I'd say it's industry level quality in terms of its functionality. It's really nice and clean. You'll see it's repopulated the whole skeleton with additional joints for better bending and more control. It's really, really nice. We also have an eye aim, a head control, tons of great stuff here. So if you have controls that are wonky looking or way too big, don't sweat it. We're going to be able to change and adjust those later. For right now, it just matters, do the bends look good? Are they in the right place? So this is a good time to talk about really briefly about one of the best features of Advanced Skeleton, which is as you try out the skeleton, it's fine. You can go ahead and just grab these controls and move them and see what's happening. The skin's not going to move yet. It's really just the bones that we're looking at. But you can start to see how they're moving and reacting and see what you think. We can also skin it, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But I want to show you a couple functions before we do that. Doing the temporary skin will help you see more issues potentially. But more importantly right now, I want to show you this functionality, which is, let's say you're going ahead and playing with it and you realize, ooh, that knee's actually kind of in a weird spot. I didn't notice that. Let me fix that. You can just go over here at any point before you skin it and hit Toggle Fit Advanced. It will send you back to the mode here where we're placing it. You can move any joint you want, hit Update, and then build the advanced skeleton again. I'm not sure if you absolutely have to rebuild every time. When you toggle, it does flip back and forth, but it always makes me nervous if I have a new skeleton and I've updated. I just might as well have it rebuild again. So that's what I tend to do. So here, if I've gone in and I've moved this joint, let's pretend that was important. Great. I'm going to update. And then I just rebuild. I skip toggling it. Again, it's only like 20 seconds, and I guarantee that everything's in the right place. It just writes over the previous skeleton. Makes me feel a little more comfortable. Oops. I just did what I told you guys not to, which is click on the screen and try to change stuff right in the middle of it working. Don't do that. Let it say build complete before you play. All right. One other thing we need to check out before we go, you'll notice these lines coming out from the knees. They won't seem the elbow, but they're there. This is going to tell you which way the knees are going to go when you raise them up. You want them to either go straight in line with the leg or slightly to the outside. Probably not to the inside and not too far to the side. We can adjust that, and I almost always have to. If you go over here and click on Pull Vector back in the Edit section, it'll put out this triangle that shows you the direction that the elbow and knees are going to go. If they're going backwards, then it just means your knee or your elbow is backwards. You need to adjust that. In this case, the elbow is going up. Typically, you want the elbow to go down a little bit or straight back, but definitely not up. And again, as I mentioned before, we want the leg to be going straight forward. So the way that we adjust this is, I'm going to toggle Fit Advanced. And then I'm going to click on the joint, press Insert, so I can move just that joint, not affect anything else. And as I slide back and forth, you'll see that'll change the angle of that triangle. You can do it from the hip too, and from the ankle. It's about the relative position of the hip to the knee to the ankle. The ankle, I like where it's positioned, so I'm going to try to do this with the hip or the knee. Once you get it, that looks much, much better. I do like it straight. I'm going to do the same thing to the elbow. Again, I would rather not mess with the shoulder or the wrist, so I'm just going to lower the elbow a little bit until it's straight, or again down a little bit. But straight's fine, especially for the cartoony characters. Once you have it placed, go ahead and you can turn the pull vector off if you care to, and then go ahead and update now. Looks like we're done, and then I'm going to rebuild one more time. Keep your eye over here. Look for a completion time. Again, about 20 seconds or so. Cool. Oh, almost done. There we are. And then you can test it again. You can see these knee aim constraints are now pointing forward. And now our knees will go forward instead of sideways. Same thing if you're IK on the arms. If you're not IK, you won't see the difference. So you can switch that over here if you want to try it. Just turn your IK blend to 10 and then give that a go. Slide it in. You can see the elbow going backwards nicely. So I'll slip that back to 0. Good idea too as we're rigging, before you do new functions, if you've been testing things, go down here to go to build pose, and that will always reset all the controls here automatically to 0. You always want to skin or detach skin in the build pose. Let's do a basic skinning. So far the rig is working without the skin. We want to see how it works with a skin, obviously. It also gives us a chance to kind of test things out really quick and see how they're looking, see if they're working the way we'd like them to. This is an important time to save. I'm going to choose Save Scene As. And this is version 5 for me. And I'll say skeleton complete. The nice thing about this is we can do a basic rigging, test things out. If we don't like it, we can detach the skin, toggle fit advance, adjust the joints, and try again. This is really helpful if this is a first time rigging, or if you're just doing a character that's got odd proportions and when you're trying to figure out good joint placement. I'm going to open up Deform Option 1. This is just basic skinning. Any skinning from that are weight painting, adjustments, anything you have to, they all have to go through this option 1. So to make this work, you want to select objects to deform. This may or may not be everything in your character. It really depends on what your plans are. In this case, everything here is going to deform. So I feel comfortable selecting all the mesh. If I've done characters with armor and things like that, that I'm going to rig separately, not through Advanced Skeleton, I would leave those off. This is just things that need to be attached to the joints. So selecting all the geometry, don't do a drag box. You can't do that anymore if you grab joints or controls. It's going to mess everything up. You could just use your layer though if you want. Right click and choose Select Objects. Should also work functionally the same way. I'm then going to click on Select Deform Joints. That's going to select all the joints. Don't try to select them by hand. You have to use the button. There's lots of hidden stuff in there that's being selected. And then hit Set Smooth Bind Options. There's some options in here that you can choose yourself. I'm setting mine to the default so you can see what I do and highly recommend. The first is under Bind Method. I always choose Closest in Hierarchy. What this will do is it will ensure, instead of just clicking, say, figuring out which skin is closest to this joint right here, it'll actually recognize that it should only select mesh within this hierarchy as opposed to grabbing skin over here and attaching it to the finger. If you get weird gooey fingers, it's probably because you missed this button here. Under Max Influences, I'm going to choose 3. This just means that each vertice on the skin can be controlled by 3 different joints at the same time. 5 is a ton and makes weight painting just awful. So I usually choose 3. If you want your joints to be colorized according to where they are on the skin, which I do like, I turn this on. And lastly, the drop-off rate of 4 is good. If you turn this higher or lower, you can choose how close it's cropping the weighting around a joint, whether it's trying to make those joints nice and sharp or really soft. But 4 tends to put out good rough results. Once you're done, just hit apply. And you should now have a skin. You can see that my joints are now colorized. And you can grab a leg or an arm and go ahead and see what it looks like. Don't get too caught up in details. You can see I'm getting some weird groin pulls in there. That has to be painted out and adjusted later. I'm actually getting a pretty impressive skinning right off the bat here, but don't expect perfection. You're going to get weird stuff, especially in the head. I tend to find my head joints get really, a lot of the chins get sucked down into the neck instead. You're not going to get perfect stuff. That's what the weighting is all about. Definitely check your shoulders. Make sure that they're, don't worry about stuff like this. We will fix this. What we're looking at really is the top of the shoulder to make sure it's getting a nice convincing looking bend and it looks like the arm's actually attached in the right place. This is actually a very nice placement. I'm very happy with that. Maybe a little far back. Damn. So I'm going to go with the flow here and take the opportunity to show you how to fix a joint, as I mentioned before. I'll show it to you instead of just tell you. I'm going to go over here to the rigging menu. You can just press F3. I'm going to select all my skin again that I just bound. So select objects in that layer. And then up here under skin, I'm going to choose unbind skin. That's going to remove all the mesh. You'll see now the joints are no longer colored and it's no longer connected. So now I can make any changes I want once I press the toggle fit advanced button. This will send me back to this section here. And now I want to adjust the shoulder because it's not in the mesh in the top view. I'm going to just press insert. I'm going to pull this forward so it's actually within the arm. That may affect the pull vector, but I don't think it will. Let's just double check. Nope, it's pretty straight still, so that looks good. So once I've done that, as always, I'm going to hit update now to update all the joint orientations, and then I can rebuild advanced skeleton. And if someone knows for sure that I can just hit the toggle fit advanced, let me know in the comment section. But again, to me, it's worth the 20-30 seconds to have it rebuild it so I know that it's good to go. I just twice tried to move that in the middle of the process. I shouldn't do that, but it looks like it didn't flake out at me. Great. So once I'm back here, we're in the same place. I again can select all my mesh, select objects, and then go ahead and select deformation joints, set smooth bind options. I set them before. I can now just go ahead and hit apply. And then I can retest the shoulder. I can guarantee you if you're working on your own, actually looked better before. I might have overcorrected. I can guarantee if you were working on your own that trying to do that kind of change would just be a huge pain in the butt. You'd have to update the joint, the controller, freeze transformations on everything, get it recentered. It would just be really annoying. And here it takes a few seconds, and it means you can practice and play back and forth and experiment till you get the right results all around. Again, they're not going to look perfect because you haven't done any weight painting yet, but you can see if it looks like it's rotating from the right place, if it looks like it's anatomically correct. So while that took a long time to show you guys, again, once you get used to it, you can pop through that part of the rig in 10 to 15 minutes. One thing I didn't mention is if your character is missing, like it's only a 3-fingered character instead of a 4-fingered character, I'm not counting the thumb, maybe your character doesn't have any legs. What I tend to do for that is I cheat. Like if I don't have another finger, which is really common in 3D for cartoony characters, you can literally just take this joint. Actually, I can't do it here, but in the joint phase, what I do is take that joint and push it way off the rig. I'll do it just so you guys can see it. I should have probably mentioned this in the hand rigging portion, but because it's pretty common, but I just push it way off. It still gets rigged and everything like that, but what I end up doing is I'll just take these controls and hide them, and while the joints are sitting out there, no one can see them, no one can see the controls, and for all they know, this is all they have to work with. So it doesn't really affect anything negatively. You just have a hidden system of joints for a finger that doesn't exist either. Now, in terms of skinning, obviously this doesn't look great. We're getting lots of weird bends and weird issues, and things are moving where they shouldn't, or just not moving at all. Am I crazy, or is that at a weird angle? I'm just going to keep going and pretend it's at a perfect angle. I think it is. So traditionally what we do at this point is paint weights and paint a lot of them. You can totally do that. You can just work like you normally would if you know how to paint weights. I'll put a link to a video on painting weights in the description below, so you can just jump to that. But in the meantime, Advanced Skeleton has a bunch of options to help this along and make this better. If you're just doing tests, you might consider, before you're trying to skin it for real, you might consider applying this Delta Mush, which I'll run over later. I'll put a link in the content section of this, so you can jump to that. Sometimes just applying the Delta Mush will get you good results right out of the gate, enough that it's fine for a quick project. It does a pretty impressive job, but it'll never be perfect compared to you actually controlling it yourself and taking some time to go through this part. But if you're in a time crunch, you can click on the mesh, hit Delta Mush, and it'll probably be good for, you know, more of a layman's project where you don't care as much. We're going to hit this up later because I always do use it. I just use it at the very end after actually doing the real work. We don't need this edit section anymore or the build section. We're now set. I'm going to go ahead and open up deform option 2, and I'm also going to save out my character because this is a really important saving point when you know the character is skinned and ready to go. So for me, this is version 6, and this will be skinned. Again, it's easy to make mistakes at this point or run into bugs in the program. I say that with all due respect to the programmer. The program's impressive and it does a ton, but things happen. So it's just good to be able to go back to this stage and try again. On that note, I should also mention that if you are using the undo function, it does work to some extent, but I'd much rather in general go back to a previous version than try to undo my way back like in a normal modeling scenario, just because a lot of stuff can end up in here that you didn't expect that can crash the whole thing later on. Better to keep it clean. Over here, this is again, our skinning option was option 1. Option 2 is the one we're going to be looking at, the skin cage. Option 3 and 4 are 2 different ways to also kind of adjust the weighting of the character and get more control. I've had bad luck with those for the most part. They just don't give us great results and they're more work. So my preferred option is option 2, and then using hand paint weighting to clean up anything I don't like before I click on the Delta Mush. All that being said, let's take a look at how the skin cage works. It's really a great function. It's going to go ahead and click on create. What it's going to do is go through my character, and it's going to replace the mesh temporarily with a generic box form of it. The nice thing about this box form, it's now created, is that it's already weighted to the joints, just sort of generically. But what we can do is we can try to match the boxy version of the character to our character, and then copy weights over from the generic version to the unweighted version, and we'll get much better results right out of the gate. For right now, I just want to make sure my mesh is either in reference mode or template mode. I'm going to use reference for now. And what we can do is we can go over here, and anywhere you see a green square, you can take that and scale it to adjust the size of the boxy mesh there at that point. And you want to try to adjust it to approximately the size of the character. You can translate a little bit, but my advice is probably don't go over the board on that. This is set up to be an elbow, and if I translate that, the weighting is going to be off. It won't be an elbow. It doesn't have to be perfect, is what it comes down to. So I'm just going to show you a few of these, and then I will pause while I finish it. You only have to do one side of the character. When we're done, we'll copy, I believe it's in this case, right to left, and just flop all the changes we made over here. If you can't see the boxy mesh, you can just turn this to template mode again. You'll see like here's that box in the middle, but just look for those green squares here. You can rotate as well, but I haven't noticed a huge and super positive effect. Just my experience. So if you get something different, that's fine. And again, think about it from different angles too. You can go, or not think about it, look at it from different angles and make sure you're getting the right scaling. Again, if you're close, this is going to be plenty. It's not like this part of the face will just get left off. It'll just get a generic weighting. So work your way through. Spend some time on the shoulders specifically. These tend to get, oops, do not click on joints. Definitely undo as soon as you do anything like that. Having trouble seeing my square in there. So the shoulders can get really bad on it without good weighting. So definitely adjust those and try to get them as close as you can. You're not going to get the torso to get everything. So just again, if you're going to have to cheat it some way or the other, you know, whether it looks good up at the top or down below, make sure it looks good around the shoulders there. So something like this. As long as your mesh is close, you should get a good result. It doesn't have to be perfect. So that's totally fine. This will transfer just fine. Maybe I'll go back and adjust it a little bit. You should count on doing some hand weighting if you have time. The fingers, usually, if they're close like this is, that's fine. If you do want to go through every one, you can, but I don't usually see a big variation in results there if your fingers are already lined up well with the joints. All right, I'm going to pause and go through this. If I need to, I'll unpause so I can walk you through some parts, but it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to unpause here just to mention, I prefer my legs to have as little overlap as possible. That creates weird problems there. The Delta Mush is going to fix some of that, but not all of it. So I'd rather get more separation than overlap here. That's definitely going to give me issues. I also want just to reiterate, do not move those blue circles. Those are your actual controls. If you move those, you're likely to create problems. Since we're at the foot here, I'm going to go ahead and leave this running while I talk you through it. The foot's a little bit weird. It's not going to line up just so, or just perfect. And that's partly because I cheated on the placement of the joints and put them on the ground, because I like that. I prefer that part to be perfect. So just do your best with your feet. Don't worry if you're not getting full coverage. There's not much else going on in here, so you should still get good results. It looks like at some point they adjusted the controls to actually line up with the bottom of the foot now. That's great. So this is a good improvement. Again, if it's wildly off like this, I'm not going to sweat it. I'm more just want to make sure that that mesh is covered. This will be fine. So that looks good. We are done. Again, I can work on trying to like get a little more coverage here, but there's nothing else for this part of the mesh to connect to. So I'm not really over concerned with the fact that we don't get full overlapping everywhere. So that's what we have. The cage is now adjusted to the model. I want to copy this over to the other side. So if you need to, you can save out here, just so if you screw up, you can, and hit the wrong button, you can go back. But I think you can also use undo here pretty safely. I'll just say skin cage. No, I didn't get that out. I'm going to finish that comment. Uh-oh. Sorry about that. I hit the wrong button. So save as, and again, I'm just going to say skin cage scaled. Again, anytime I think I might make a mistake that would make me have to do stuff like that again, I just save it and then comment it. So I think this is right to left. Let's see what we get. Yeah, so it's the characters right to their left. Oh, looks like we got something going on here. Looks like something didn't translate. I've never seen that before. Looks like we got a scaling issue here. I'm going to leave it for the moment. Normally what I do is I just go back, maybe try it again from my my previous file. I should say it normally with Advanced Skeleton, if something goes wonky, it usually continues to go wonky. So it's gonna play with these for a second, see if that playing with them readjusts anything. And then right to left. All right, this time it worked. So that was a good call. Again, usually if there's an error of some kind or a bug, better to stop and go back than just sort of plow through like I just said I was going to, because usually you just get weirder results. I knew I could always paint it out, but I don't want to paint the feet. That's awful. I'm just going to resave that, or save it as a new version, because I'm happy I got there, even though I just saved. And I'll say skin cage copied. Now we have a few other options here, and I do actually recommend them. I could copy Weigths now to see the results, but I know I'm going to prefer a couple of these other options here. So under adjust, I'm going to skip the copy Weigths. I could do this now, which will allow me to copy the Weigths to the model, but I'm going to do this first. So adjust, what this is going to do is it's going to see here, did it already create that? Oh, they're currently off. Let me show that again. There's another thing called Skin Curves 2, which allow you, which will show you kind of where the weighting is. I never actually tried adjusting these. Maybe I should. Let's do one as a test. Although it's going to screw up the next thing that I do, right to left. Oh, okay. So maybe it's worth going through there and adjusting those, but this is more for deformation than it is for perfect weighting. So you'll see this deformation width button. If I click on it now, you'll see is it moves and concentrates the weighting around the joints. You can see around the elbow now it's much tighter, around the shoulder it's more tight. And this is going to create a better looking weighting around the joints. So I don't think it's worth adjusting these. They should automatically adjust to the size here. And since they're going to be kind of on either side of these joints, you can probably just leave it. Create groin locators is a great option. What this is going to do is it's going to create some locators right around the groin area. Let me change my background color there. It's a little bit easier to see. There's one here and there's one in between the legs. I'm having trouble seeing it, but I can click on it there. You can also see it over here, groin side, groin start. The idea here is you want to put the groin side on the edge of the hips, kind of like where the hip bone would be. The idea is this is going to adjust the weighting to match the angle from the groin to the outside edge of the hip. So this would be right around here for me. The middle one you can just leave in the center, but you just want to adjust it so it lines up with the bottom of the groin. So for me, that's, I believe, right here. You can also look in your main view to make sure it's solidly stuck on the crotch. There it is. So with that, we can hit adjust groin area, and you'll see it'll adjust the weighting to follow that line, which is great. It gives us a much better bend, a much better butt as well. If you make a mistake, no big deal. You can just go back here. I'm actually just going to undo and then grab that groin side. And I just got done saying undo doesn't always work, but usually works for this to get less of an extreme angle. This is more cartoony character. So adjust groin area again. There, it's a little less extreme. I think that'll get me better results. Again, you can save before and then keep playing with it to see what you get. The other thing I want to do here, so I basically used all three of those adjustments. I think they're all good. I'm going to create some sliders. These things are really, really helpful too. What it'll do is it'll give us a lot of control of the individual joints after we finish with the skin cage. I don't recall what this switch does, so in good advanced skeleton form, I'm going to go ahead and save out as another version. You will never be unhappy that you have too many versions. These are usually really small files. So version 9, skin cage adjusted. So they should be able to create just fine as is. I'm going to note here that the options have a lot of help, including a video link to show you what this looks like. You can see here what's happening is that whatever we click on in terms of the curves, it's going to create helper joints that allow us to control the level of deformation at the elbow and at the inner part of the elbow. I think this is one of the best things in advanced skeleton in terms of helping maintain the sense of weight for not much work. It mentions down here that adding it to green skin curves helps you preserve volume. I believe those are the ones here. And the red skin curves are going to slide along the skin to help maintain the stretching around the elbow, knee, etc. So I'm going to apply these to my elbows and knees. I think that's where they look best. So I'm going to select all three of these and choose Create Sliders. You can see the extra joints that are created. In this case, I'm sure the include controller might be a separate controller for these. The way I usually work on these though, is if you click on the joint itself, you can choose the amount of effect right here. So So I'll show those in just, well, I'll show those right now. Why not? So what we're going to see here is I'm going to rotate the joint. And as I do, actually, it doesn't make sense to do this until we can see the effect on the mesh, but we do want to create them before we copy our weights. So at this point, we're good to go. We're all ready to copy. I'm going to, it says select your objects to deform. So I'm going to go under here and find my geometry. It keeps getting moved around, which is fine. So model geo is still where all the mesh is. And I'm going to grab all my mesh. Or again, you can go faster just by right-clicking and choosing your high poly model here. And then I'm going to choose copy weights. That's going to go through it only takes a few seconds. It's going to go through every piece of mesh of my original character in here and apply the weights. At this point, I can hide my skin curves and I can hide the skin cage and I can test it. So I can grab here and see what the elbow looks like. You can see already that those skin curves are trying to maintain volume for me. They're doing a pretty good job actually for their default settings. In some cases it might look bad or ugly. I also didn't do it on the other joints. So let's compare it to what we get here if I don't have the skin cage. You can see lots of compression here and it's rounding significantly without that extra level of control. Not everything's going to be perfect. If I look at the head, it's probably going to be better, but you can still see that throat is dragging behind. I'm going to have to paint that by hand. Let's see if the shoulder's improved. Way better. Oh my gosh, that just saved me like an hour's worth of work there making those shoulders work. That's kind of incredible. It's not usually quite that good in my experience. So another good place to check is the legs. You often get some kind of weird craziness in here. That's already much, much better. It's good to test your the character's butt to see if the butt maintains. Nice crease. This is working out great. This is one of the best wings I've ever actually gotten right out of the gate. So it basically just roughed everything in for us, which is fantastic. Now, in this case, I didn't do deformation weights for the other elbow and the knees. Let's get those in there and then we'll move on. So I still have the skin cage and everything up. So all I need to do here is just go ahead and grab the green, red curves on both the knees and the elbows. You could try some other parts of the body, but I feel like these are the ones that really need it. The other ones may or may not be useful, but this is what I always do. So I'm going to choose, where is it? Create sliders. It'll take a second, but I should see sliders everywhere. And then again, all I need to do is select my mesh, right click and add selected objects. So now the mesh should be selected. It's not. Add selected objects. It's still not. Select objects. There we go. Oh, nuts. I just added a bunch of things there that I shouldn't have. Well, maybe that's worth undoing or going back. I should go back and just choose a previous file in case it created something I can't see, but I'm just going to give this a go. Select objects is what I was looking for. And then again, create. The sliders already did, so that's good to go. I just need now to copy weights. So one more time. Looks like it already did it. And again, we can see the difference in the elbow right away. We have a much better elbow. The inside could use some work. So let's take a minute and just adjust these really quick. It doesn't take long and the effect is great. What I like to do for this is I go ahead and I will bend the arm. And with it bent, I'm going to click on the joint here. Oops, sorry, the each control. So you'll see this function at the bottom. As you slide it back and forth, I'm sliding it by clicking on the name, not the number, middle mouse clicking anywhere in the window and dragging back and forth. Now you can sort of adjust this in or out as you see fit. The outer one's pretty easy. The inner one's harder to get a perfect setup, like a crease and everything. You're going to go play back and forth between these controls. So these controls, when you slide, will go up and down. The idea is as they come in, they should be coming together to create all those kind of wrinkly creases. And on the outside, that might be a little too far for this guy. And again, it's a play back and forth to get the right look. but with it bent, you can see the look. And same thing here. Here we're trying to get a little bit of a stretch. So it should stretch around the elbow instead of cinch up on it. So we'll pull these back a little bit, just trying to get the right feel, then test it again by rotating back and forth. That's actually looking pretty good. And again, if you had to paint your weights like this, you'd be there for hours trying to get this to work. I'll get that a little sharper. So play around with it a little bit. Try to see if you can get a good look. Might be better here to turn off the X-ray so you can really get a good look at the skin. But that's looking pretty good. The cool thing is once you have good numbers, you can just copy them over to the other side. There's no button for it that I'm aware of. It's literally a matter of looking at the numbers and then copying them over. Same thing with the knee, same basic function. So let's turn our X-ray joints back on. And just see what we got. So same type of thing. You can see we're getting a little bit too much compression here, but the knee looks much better than it otherwise would have. So we just adjust the sliders again to get the right feel. Admittedly, I'm surprised that it's doing nothing. Yeah, somehow that didn't get connected. It's possible I forgot to copy the weights, which means I'm going to have to copy the weights again. Just want to reset before I do anything. So I'm just going to click over here, go to build pose, and then once again, grab all the mesh that I want to have connected and choose copy weights. As long as the skin cage is back there and has all its functionality, it should work just fine. The fact that this is joint based means it shouldn't have changed any of the functionality of the joint. Let's see if that worked. So once again, you want to make these changes while the leg is bent. There we go. So now it's connected. Again, the joint was always there, but it just wasn't attached to any of the skin. I'm going to touch these up and copy the weights over, and then I'll show you what I got. All right. All my slider settings are copied from one side to the other. Be great to have in the future a button that would just do this. This would be easy programming, I would think, and definitely save even more time. Maybe I'll pitch that. This is looking great. I'm very happy with it. I'm going to go ahead and save this out. So this will be version 10. Skin cage complete with sliders. Now, I definitely would recommend saving before this next step. If you want to make changes to the rough weighting, this is the best time to do it. If you were to delete the cage and have to reapply this, you'd lose all your work. So you definitely want to maintain what you have right now. So this is definitely a critical place to save. If you got all this way and then realized, oh man, I need to change a joint placement, that would be unfortunate, but you should still be able to detach skin. I think you can still keep the cage, do a toggle fit, all that stuff, but hopefully you're well past that point. When you are done, what you want to do is you want to delete the skin curves. It deletes all the extra stuff in here you don't need. There's also a delete cage. We want to do both of these things. So I'm going to delete the cage first and delete skin curves. And now we're just back to our high poly model. You can see why we'd want to save here. And now we should have a model that's actually functioning quite a bit better with really nice deformations everywhere, maintaining volumes. This is pretty incredible work. And again, it seems like a lot of work, but this is no effort compared to what it used to be back in the day. We still have a couple things to take care of. For example, that head weighting. There might be issues in the shoulders, but I think we got those pretty great out of the gate. Maybe check some of the things like here, the rotation in your body, but this is looking really, really wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and shut this part down. We're done with it. And like I said, option 3 and option 4, we don't really need those anymore. Those are they're a different way to do what we just did. I think that what we just did though is the most efficient and produces the best results in the shortest period of time. This next option is, well, exactly that. It's our first actual option, something that we can choose to do or not to do. Because of that, I always say save your rig out before you try optional stuff to make sure that you can always go back if you don't like your results. So I'm going to say skin cage. I guess I already did skin cage complete with slider, so I'm kind of in that spot already. I guess I'm okay. You can see I'm paranoid about saving. The Delta Mush is a plugin, or was a plugin. It became part of Maya probably a good 6 or 7 years ago, an official part of Maya. But basically what it does is it goes through and applies this formula to the weighting that's going to make it, it's a deformer that we can't see, but it basically makes everything around the model move like skin. It's pretty incredible what it does. Smooths out a lot of issues right from the get-go, especially like around the groin and the shoulder area. You can see right now it's a little bit stiff in here. As the shoulder comes down, it just sort of smashes into the chest. That's part of the model, but it's also just the nature of mesh that's been rigged. The Delta Mush, again, it's important to say before you use it, because you might choose to only put it on the skin. It might make the shirt here look too like skin as opposed to a shirt, especially if you're going to put dynamics in the shirt or something like that. But in general, if I'm just going to have a more basic cartoony character like this, I'm going to put it on everything because it just works great. You can paint it on and off if there's areas where you don't like it. It gives you quite a bit of control, and again, it just makes everything smooth out. It doesn't make anything too soft either. It's not going to like take away, you know, make him lose volume in the shoulder. It just makes everything look better in general. So I almost always use it. There's this option here to harden weights, which I usually don't do, but sometimes if it kind of applies too hard into an area or does kind of overcompensates, you could undo it and then do the harden weights. Again, another good reason to save here. My preference would be if you don't like your result, open the file back up, go back to the last version and try it again. I'm going to go ahead, like I said, and apply this to literally everything in the character. I'm going to skip the harden weights. I tend to find, again, that doesn't look great. I'm going to apply the Delta Mush. Just takes a second there. Let's see what it did with the shoulder since we were looking there a bit. So we're still getting that overlap, but what you're seeing here is we're getting a little bit more softness in the shoulder, which could be good or bad, but in this case, I like it, and a little bit smoother action here. That's a good place to check for it, so I'm liking that result. Not quite as dramatic as I thought it was going to be. Let's also check the legs. Another place where it tends to look really, really good is up here in the butt area and in the groin. So I usually take my leg and I'll pull it out and then I'll stretch here. We're getting a smoother transition there as well. Admittedly, this is subtly better than I thought it was going to be. Typically, I see more of a dramatic result, but my initial results from the rough weighting were already really good. So I'm going to keep it on. It's relatively cheap. It doesn't cost a lot in terms of rendering time or animating time. So I'm happy with that. Again, I could try again with the hardening weights and see what I get. Well, maybe I'll do it. Okay, this is the same thing with hardened weights. Let's see if we see any difference. A little bit more compression down here. I actually like that better. And let's see, I'm also looking for errors. Like if it just doesn't look good, I don't want it. That looks pretty good. Kind of the same setup in the groin area. I would test everything in here, including the ankles. Just rotate everything and see what you get. And make sure, again, you like it. The head's probably still going to be messed up. Oh my gosh, it is not. That looks quite good. All right, life is good. At this point, we are done for the most part with the rig. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jump ahead and I'm going to show you how to publish at this point, just to get this thing out the door. And then I'll come back and show you a few extra options that may or may not apply to you. But at this point, we have a functional rig. Talking with you guys and going through this took about 1 hour and 40 minutes. If I wasn't talking through it again, we'd probably be through the whole process in about a half an hour, which is just incredible to get a rig of this quality and a skinning of this quality in that period of time. So let's go ahead and finish it out, and then I'll come back and show you a few extra bonuses that you might consider trying. So what does finishing it out mean? Well, at this stage, you might feel like you're done and good to go, and you might very well be in terms of the quality of the rig, but this isn't actually usable yet in any sort of functional capacity because we have the rigging file here and we have the model is still being referenced in. You can see over here, if I click on the geometry tab down to model geo, you can see a little blue dot, which means the model isn't actually in this file. It's just a link. That's not going to work for any sort of production. We need to export this thing and mash all the stuff together that we've been doing. So it's really easy in Advanced Skeleton to do this. You just have a couple things we have to cover. So I'm going to skip all this other stuff. Again, I'll come back and talk about the parts that I think are pertinent for a basic rig. But for right now, we're going to skip it. And I'm going to go over to optimize. This is something you do want to do. Absolutely save before you do this part in case anything happens. I've already saved mine as the skin cage complete with sliders. I think I did. I'm going to save it again. And basically we can kind of go through here and just click on the buttons one at a time. Some of them are unnecessary. Some of them are optional. Some of them are absolutely important. So I'm begin with delete unused nodes. So anything that is no longer being used as part of the rig, it'll just get rid of them. This is making our rig lighter and easier to use. Remove unused influences. Same type of deal, but this is removing any controls that aren't doing anything to the rig. Whether they're seen or not seen. Prune small weights. I'm always a little cautious of this one, but basically it goes through and looks for any weights in the skin that are really small, like 0.01. That's tiny. And it gets rid of them and just kind of averages them out with the local weights local to there. I'm sorry, not averaging out. It just puts the weight on the other joints that are influencing that current piece of skin. It's probably a good thing to do. I just get nervous. If I like what I see, I don't want to change the weighting. Delete saved UIs. This is stuff from Advanced Skeleton that we don't need anymore. Definitely get rid of that. There could be a whole bunch of junk in there that's just wasting space. Delete unused joints. Be a little careful this one. If you have a joint that's not skinned to anything, but you plan to use it for something, I sometimes put additional joints in there. It'll get rid of those. So I often skip this. There's most of the joints I'm going to be using, and if it has an extra joint in there, it doesn't hurt me. Tag all controllers. I actually have no idea what this does, but I'm going to run it. It doesn't seem to do anything bad. It gives, I can see the message right here. It says, I'll pause. Yeah, still not sure what it does. It says it tags controllers and it adds another option to the main control. Oh, it's added only show the controllers when you're near them. But that's something that we can turn on and off, I believe. So I just need to find out where that is so I can turn it off because I don't like it. So I couldn't find where that option was. It said on the main controller, but I saw no attribute for it and I didn't like it. So I went back and opened up the previous file and ran through my things again. Good thing, because I also noticed that here when I clicked on delete save used UIs, it said I had to save and reopen this file for it to take effect. So I'm going to save this out again. Again, you can never have too many versions. Don't let anyone tell you different. Delete saved UIs. Great. So I guess I'm just going to open that file and hopefully it actually did what it's supposed to. We're not going to see it over here. Interesting. The skin cage somehow got left up. No big deal. I can just go back to my body section and deform option 2 and delete skin curves. There we go. And delete the skin cage. I do not want those hanging around. I am now on to delete unused joints, which I'm going to skip. I'm going to skip the tag all controllers. This last part you can do if you want. It makes their model a little bit faster for a game engine, but game engines are so fast right now, I am not going to do it. It's also for, there's a custom option to adjust this to how you want. I'm going to keep the original option. I want more control for the face, not less. Great. I'm going to close down the optimize menu, and the last thing we need to do is go to publish. And what this is going to do is it's going to make the last couple changes, and it's going to then mesh the mesh layer that we have currently referenced in, and it's going to permanently connect it to the skeleton for a published, ready to go rig. So for that, you just want to hit the first button. It's going to take all and any of your mesh layers and put them to R. That's really important. The reference mode is going to keep an animator from clicking on the mesh and ruining the rig. Set joints to hidden. We do not want to see those. That definitely is annoying. Go to build pose. You never want to save the character in some other pose other than the original one. And then publish. It did it. If you go to wherever your files are saved, you'll see here there is now it just takes your current file name and sticks published on the end, but now we have the published version. And for this, what I would do instead, I would go ahead and leave it at version 11 so I know where it's coming from in case I make changes later. But Tuna Rig version 11 published, or if you just want to keep it simple, you could say Tuna Rig version 01 published and increment from there. That is a ready to go file. It should be smaller. It's often smaller. It's not smaller than the previous files because we deleted a bunch of stuff, but it looks like it's still a reasonable file size. And again, I can put this now into work in my any film or my project that I'm working on. If you got this far, congratulations. You can now use Advanced Skeleton to make you rigs in minutes instead of days. There's also a facial rig that I'll do another video on. I need to do an update for that one. My last one's pretty old. That's really fantastic. It does incredible work. It's just finicky. But it's a good practice to learn how to do your topology correctly and try it. I highly recommend that video. Again, I'll do an update soon for that one as well if you want to follow along. I am going to, like I said, go over some of the options here just to kind of give you other ways to play. But that is the main functionality of the program. Now that the rig is done, we have a bunch of options that we can kind of play with. Some are definitely very helpful. Some aren't as necessary. I'm going to do this in two phases. I want to show you the one that I use the most, which is back under the body section. This part called control curves is really helpful. So this allows you, I should say this differently. You might find that some of your controllers aren't quite what you want them to look like. You might have ones at weird angles depending on how the joints were put in there. You might have ones that if your character is really large, that maybe you can't even see the controller because it's stuck inside the body. Maybe you just don't like where it's placed. Maybe you want this somewhere else. So it's good to know how to adjust these. The control curve section allows you to play quite a bit with how they look and where they reside. So I'm going to show you the easiest section first, and then I'm going to show you the easiest way to apply these, and then how to actually use this setup. So for me, I often find I just want complete control. And so what you can do is you can either create a new control just by drawing it, and then choose swap curve. And it's supposed to work. I've had some issues within the past, but maybe you can get it to work. The other way to do it is just right click and choose control vertices. Select your control vertices, not the joints. That was my mistake. And then you can literally just move and rescale and reshape this any way you want. Maybe you want more of a halo. Often when I'm working as an animator, I prefer to have a control in the back of the head so it doesn't get in the way of me trying to see the face. I don't like a halo over my character. You can do individual points here. You can do whatever you want. I wouldn't actually do this. Maybe I go the other way, make it more oval. But the idea is, as long as you're grabbing the control vertices, the object functions exactly the same way. Nothing's different there. That's one way to approach these. Now, interesting, I haven't seen that before, but that's cool. You can also do things like you can scale and nope. Sorry, this defaults to 1. So you can also, so the first option here, you can do scale, which just scales all of them together. I don't think I've ever used this one because it's usually pretty good right out of the bat, but if you say type in like 1.5 and then hit scale, it will scale all controls on here. Unfortunately, to get it back, you can't just type in 1 because then it doesn't scale it by anything. You have to do like 0.8 or 0.7. I'm just going to undo. Again, I don't normally like to undo in Advanced Skeleton, but I'll take a chance here because I have it saved. We already talked about the swap curve. You can rotate control. So again, just select the one you want and you can rotate it X, Y, or Z. So here, I think in the X, we get a nice reaction here. So you can rotate around. Again, I don't use that really often. I just place it where I want directly. Sorry about that. And that. The color options I use a lot. So maybe you prefer a different color for the torso, which I do. I don't like them all to blend together. It's much easier if they're separated out. So what you can do is you can choose a color. I'll choose red. It'd be nice if it's a color that kind of disappears in the background, but for right now, this is fine. Set color. We'll then change the color. That actually disappears a little bit too much. So you do want to think about your animators and think about them both ignoring controls so they can pay attention to the body, but also being able to see them. So maybe I'll make those a brighter red. That's definitely better. So you can separate, but the same color as the bottom. That's fine. So set colors as you see fit. Things like here, like where there are going to be lots of overlap, or things hidden, like the neck. Maybe I do that one too in the red, so it's part of the spine. Let's see, I hit the wrong button there. And then the head, I often would do a different color too, just so it pops a bit against the background, maybe that green. Something where it doesn't get all confusing in here with all these different overlapping loops. I definitely think about scale. So in this case, scaling them down individually. If I'm having trouble not selecting the skeleton here, so I can temporarily go down to display here and choose hide joints. So I don't have to keep clicking on them. So I would adjust these to be a little bit more trim. You want them to be easy to select and see, but again, not get in the way of the animator. So I would go through the whole thing and adjust all those so they're easy to use. Fingers especially might be some place where you want to do this, so that's not bad. The bottom control here, I tend to prefer be larger. So there you go. Again, as long as you're doing control vertices, it won't affect anything negatively. You can play with the control vertices all day. The other thing you can do is you can do a bunch of controllers at once. So for example, I can choose all FK controllers on the right side of the body. I can select them and then set color. So like all fingers on the I can say are going to be brown. So select them, set color, and now they're all brown, if that's better for you. Probably better if those blend in. Those can make a real mess of the hand. So here, I'll select again, maybe do more of a beige color. Anyway, you get the idea. So you can custom color these things. I find that really helpful. And again, make sure your controls are easy to find and see. Things like this one here, like for the hip, or that's at the root, that's the root. It might be helpful to separate these out so they're not on top of each other. Might be worth doing too. So I'm not going to do that now, but I just want to make sure that you understand that those are options that are available. I tend to like the IK handles. That's what these are, to be more towards the back. So you could select all of them and just kind of move them at once if you want. So they're kind of in the same plane back here, but I like them kind of away from the body and not in the way of my animator. So I tend to find that it's a little bit of extra work, but if you're working in a production where efficiency is important, which of course we mostly are, saving time for your animators, even 20 minutes a day, an hour a day, could be hundreds of hours over the course of production, especially for a big one. So it's worth spending time here making this look good. So there's a few functions here that are worth pointing out that may be useful to you. If you want to keep working on the model, you can't really use a lot of the functions in Advanced Skeleton now that it's published. So if you want to keep working on it, with the exception of a couple things here, you're going to have to go back to an unpublished version, which is why I always save it out right before you publish. Let me just walk through some of these really quick. Back in the body section, there's a bunch of geometry things that I skipped. These can be helpful, not as useful these days with much faster video cards and rendering engines, but for example, the mannequin, this actually might even work now, I don't know, with the unpublished version. We'll create another mesh below this one that you can use to place are to pose the model. So for example, if your model's super dense mesh, it just won't animate in real time. You can add one of these and be in much better shape. I'll show you one of them. So for this one, I'm going to go back to before I started cleaning and optimizing. So this would be the skin cage complete with sliders. That's when the model is pretty much done. So for example, I won't do the mannequin. I will. I guess the skeleton's the coolest one. So I'll just go ahead and create it. It's going to go through the character and it's going to use their bones to actually create a skeleton in the same size and proportion. I wouldn't find this very useful. It just looks really cool. So there's your skeleton and it functions and works the same way. It's pretty heavy. So while it looks awesome, I don't think it has a lot of function for animators. It feels a little bit lighter than it used to. I haven't used it for a while, but it's cool. But that's it for me. So probably the more useful one here, I'm going to hide the skeleton. The polyboxes, if you have a really really slow computer that you're trying to animate on, this will kind of recreate the character in boxes, kind of like the skin we had before. In fact, exactly like the skin we had before, but this one's actually rigged to it, and you can animate, and it's nice and fast and lean. So you can animate with this and switch to the high poly, at least in theory. But to me, that's not the most helpful because it doesn't really approximate the shape correctly. Mannequin's the same thing. Creates a mannequin version. I haven't done the muscular. Let's check it out. See what we get here. Ideally, you want to have a model that was either low poly, or the muscles aren't really helpful here either unless you're trying to do a study. So I like the idea. It's cool, but it doesn't really sort of function for me as an animator. So I'll leave all those off just to keep the file lighter, but it's cool to know that they're there. There is a skin cut up function, which is really interesting. This sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, but what it'll do is you can click on the skin and create a cut up version of the skin. So it'll look exactly like your model, but it's just going to be parented to the joints, I think is what's happening, and it moves way faster. It just doesn't have deformations and you wouldn't want to render with it, but good to know it's there. So I'm back here to my previous version. Let's look at a couple of these other menus. So the squash controller is kind of cool. Oh, that's, sorry, not what I thought it was. That's for the face that I was thinking of. The custom controllers is cool. It allows you to do a few different things. Like if you want to kind of play with things, let's say a character had like a big belly, you could select some vertices on here and do a cluster control. That's my favorite one. It just gives you a handle then to kind of move that around and attaches it to the system. You just have to create, start here by creating a soft mod and then going through the actual controller. I'll show that in a separate video for sure. It's a really great one. It's a common thing to need to do that you would need to use. For me, the one that I use the most is the control curves. This allows you to adjust your curves themselves. I should do this in a separate section. So I'd be remiss if I didn't point out a couple extra things in here under the tools menu that might be helpful. I don't use most of these things, but I do like the walk designer and the animation tester. The animation tester especially, you can basically allows you to add animation to all your controls in different increments, 90 degrees, 45, whatever, but 90 is pretty common. The idea being you can then scrub in the timeline here while you're painting weights. Even the painting weight tool is right there for you to use. You can apply it to one side, both sides, whatever. But it's a nice tool when you're painting weights just to allow yourself to see bends in animation without having to kill yourself doing it by hand on every one. So if you know weight painting, you might be excited by that. The walk designer is kind of cool. It's a little funny, a little bit silly, a little campy, but it does allow you to really quickly see how your character is moving and stretching. So you basically hit your start menu here or your start button there. It's going to connect the character and they will start walking. It's not even a bad walk as an animator. You can choose different things to sort of add in there, a little bit of swagger. Maybe you want to go more female than male, which I don't know what that means. Maybe it's just more hips. I don't know. You can add in a little bit of run, a lot of run. I don't know. The idea here, though, you probably don't want to do as many as I'm doing. You can just solo one at a time. You can kind of look around the character while it's moving and get a sense of how the bends are working or not working. Are you getting weird stuff, or is it looking pretty good? And it's just a really great, cheap way of getting a chance to see how your deformations are working. So I like it, just for that purpose alone. The more extreme it is, the more likely you're to see issues. So when you're done, you just cancel and close. It removes all the animation from the character, and you're back to square one. You can just be sure and go to build pose, not that you shouldn't be there, and you're good to go. So those are two things that I like to use as well. That's it for this demo. I hope you got something out of it. I'll be stunned if you even made it this far. But hopefully that gives you kind of the basic overview of how this program functions and what it can do for you. Again, I will do some later shorter videos for real about some of the custom features in here. It's got a lot of great ones. It can actually adapt to a lot of situations. And again, be sure to check out the facial rigging video. I'll update that soon, but you can check out the older one. It still is quite close to the current interface. We'll get you through it. So good luck to all of you. And yeah, I hope this gets you animating and making films and games a lot faster. If you have questions, you can drop them in the comments. I'm not great about getting back to them, but I'll do my best. You can always also reach out to the programmer on their main website. Again, the link is below. He's really great about getting back to people and helping bug fix even. So you can reach out to him as well. Best of luck.